So, as you mentioned, I'm Thomas. I'm with AppLovin. We essentially have grown into the biggest independent mobile marketing platform. Emphasis on independent here. We also the only provider for ads on actual apps on Apple TV. We're probably going to start with the obligatory sort of like introduction from these gentlemen. So, guys, please go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Is this on? Yeah, now it is. My name is Jami. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Futureplay or Futureplay Games. I've been this year 16 years in the mobile games industry. Started as a game designer back in 2000, developing web games. Those were awesome, 16 years ago. But the industry has moved forward quite a bit. Going through companies like Digital Chocolate, EA, Playfish, Rovio, and we have a 10-month-old startup called Futureplay now, with 4 other guys together with me, and it's cool to be on this panel with other smart people.
Hey, Anton Gauffin from Huuuge. I've been on mobile gaming almost as long as Jami. I started a company called Game Lion, my first mobile gaming company in 2002. Sold it later in 2007, only to buy it back in 2014. And at that time I said to my guys that, hey, this time it's huge. So that's also the story behind the company name. We are 85 people focused on free-to-play casino, making free-to-play casino truly social. So the social gameplay aspects are where we focus very much at Huuuge.
Yeah, hi, my name is Philipp, and I lead a small team at mobile game developer and publisher Wooga, based in Berlin. And basically what we are trying to achieve is optimizing the monetization strategy on top of already building fun games. So everything around live operations, running sales campaigns, running events, but then also obviously in-game advertising.
Perfect. So first of all, I want to make sure everybody knows. So we have 3 different genres here on the panel. So we have Jami, which is essentially like a swiper idle game. I want to say midcore. He kind of doesn't agree. We have Social Casino, which with ads obviously can do a lot of stuff, and we have Wooga, which is famous for the casual games like Diamond Dash and Jelly Splash, but they're also working on IP stuff. So in order to kick this off, kind of like a pretty simple question. So in the end, when it comes to your monetization mix at the moment, including in-app purchases and ads, so if you could share some sort of like a breakdown in between these two, and how did you get there?
Start from there.
Yeah, sure. So roughly 85% of our revenue comes from in-app purchases. That's really what we built games for. And then since about, I think 3 years now, we also do in-game advertising, and it varies game by game, I have to say. So it's really different on a game-by-game basis, but roughly 15% of our total revenue comes from advertising. Half of that comes from interstitials, and the other half comes from incentivized video ads. Those are the only 2 ad formats we are using at the moment in our games.
We have also multiple apps on the market, so the actual percentage varies a lot depending on the product. We are big believers of opt-in rewarded ad units, so the rewarded video has been extremely good for us. All in all, I would say that as we are a bit bigger on Android than on iOS, that it's maybe 50-50 already for us. So we monetize really well with rewarded video, and we also use interstitials, but clearly the rewarded video is where we've been focusing a lot.
We kind of started the whole company, Futureplay Games, based on the fact that we saw in previous companies like Rovio and Playfish, for example, that if you do ads well, you can actually benefit a lot from a monetization point of view, and also that the users are not allergic or hating your ad integrations if you do them well. So we kind of focused on ads, and we coined the term called view to play, and we're 75% ad monetization and 25% IAP. It fluctuates a bit per market. In some markets, it's almost 70%, down to 70% ads and 30% IAP. In kind of higher income, more spending, you know, Southeast Asia, Taiwan, Macau, Hong Kong, etc., and Western Europe and US. But we've been very happy as well. We only do one type of ad in our one game that we have live since November 5th, Farm Away. So we don't actually use the actual rewarded video type. We just use regular video ads as the only type in our game with 5 different integrations that we've done into the game, and we give the rewards ourselves. And we don't give out any rewards that are actual currency or anything like that. We just give boosters for our players.
Thank you. Going next, so essentially my question would be when it comes to the production cycle itself. So Jami, you kind of like answered the question already. The whole business model is actually built around ads or Futureplay. But most other companies are actually not built that way. So my question would be, when do you actually start thinking about monetization? Is that at the beginning of the cycle, after the concept, at the very end, so essentially the game is ready, and you feel like, should we add something here, should we add something there? Or when do you actually start thinking about how to monetize that game?
I'll just start again. So if you've asked that question 2 years ago, I would have said, no, we only build for in-app purchases first, and then about half a year later, we think about advertising and try to put that on top. That has changed over the year 2015. So now we really talk to the game teams at Wooga really early on when they already built the concepts, when they start building the first prototypes. We try to find mechanics there where we think that advertising really could make sense and try to integrate it really deeply into the core game loop. Because at this point, we think that's the only way actually users will be willing to engage with ads, especially with rewarded video ads, obviously, right? Interstitials you can always force upon the user, but with rewarded video ads, you have to really think about how to integrate it into the core mechanics. So yeah, basically concepting phase. That's where it all starts for us now.
Quite the same. So when we started, we were more doing forced interstitial ads, and we've come a long way since those times. And with the rewarded video, it's more design-centric operation, so thinking the whole UX, how that works, and later on really optimizing the performance, doing weekly or bi-weekly live ops, changing different parameters and trying really to get the performance up. So for us, it starts early, but it continues. It never stops. So it's like you are going from best to best. You are trying to do that every week, and it's good to have a lot of energy to pump up those numbers.
No, I agree. It's definitely something that you have to start with. Whether you're talking about ad monetization or monetization in general, it's not in the end that you only need to care about monetization, of course. But if you don't think of it right away from the start, I don't think you can ever do a really good job of kind of interviewing it into the game so that it's part of the fun, it's part of the progress, it's part of the challenge, it's part of the reward, and part of all the systems or loops or vectors or however you want to break it down from a physics point of view. But what we did, for example, from our kind of Futureplay approach was that we started designing the game from the ground up with that thought in mind, that what if there is no IAP? That even though we have IAPs in the game and we're making 25 to 30% of our revenue from IAPs, we took the mindset that the ads need to work so well in the game that we're making so much kind of revenue from the ads that we don't have to worry about the IAP monetization. So we started first kind of thinking about the ad integrations and the ad rewards and the ad economy, not purely from an economy and numbers point of view, but also from the session flow and session to session appointment mechanics, and how do we interweave that into the actual kind of core design of the game loops from session to session and all that.
Marvelous. So my next question, so you mentioned a couple of things about the production cycle and also start thinking about ads. My question would be, I suppose when you're kind of like building a game and you think something might work, such as rewarded video in a certain placement, but some of them actually probably 1 or 2 out of 3 might actually not work. So essentially my question would be, how do you test these and how do you essentially change not only within the game, kind of like certain perception that something works and it didn't work? And also, well, I mean, again, for you, it's so like easy question. How did you adapt to the change in the industry? Because video is obviously on the up and running. Everybody uses it. It has a huge impact on the whole industry. So it would be great to know how you test these things. How do you evaluate them? And if you're willing to do it, also feel free to share some sort of like ARPDAO benchmarks you're trying to achieve via ads.
Well, if I go first, we've been doing the same things as Anton said. That of course during live ops we optimize based on data, what to show to whom and when and from where, in what places and all that. But more importantly, what we did kind of was to focus on designing all the monetization vectors, whether they're IAP or ad related, in a way that they kind of naturally fit into the theme and the setting of the game and the flow of the game session, so that it's, even if it's ad and even if it's opt-in, it needs to feel like a natural part of the game session. So when you feel like doing it, it's not in your face all the time or anything like that, and make them also thematically kind of well integrated into the setting and all that. And of course we look at a lot of data in terms of, from the gameplay point of view, KPIs, that which units are performing better, which units are used more and by the users, etc. Not only in terms of performance from monetization point of view from the ad networks or anything, but how people view and feel about them in the game, or are they complaining about the kind of sessioning, how often you have those units available, etc. But in terms of the transition to video or the industry change, for us it's easy because we embraced it and started the whole company with that in mind, that it's a $100 billion market this year globally, compared to the IAP market being maybe 1/4, 1/3 of that. And we thought that it's an easier and more accessible market for Western developers to access that revenue than the huge growth in mobile IAP, mostly coming from Southeast Asia, which is a tougher market for Western developers to breach.
Yeah, you know, if you look at the top grossing charts, so they don't track ad revenue. So there's a lot more talk about how much companies are making IAP revenue and app annies, and they don't tell you, you know, how much companies are making ad revenue, and that's why I think a lot of the people on the industry, they somehow are not paying enough attention what's been going on. And to your question, how do we see if something is not working, and how do we iterate these the whole ad monetization? I think for us it's still about being focused on all the key free-to-play metrics. So at the same time you want to be very focused on retention, that you keep your players in and playing your game, and otherwise for us we try to maximize the amount of impressions per DAU. So trying to change different parameters or creatives, and basically being fast in experimenting. So I think for us the key is that the faster we can experiment and do new live ops, the faster we progress as a business.
Yeah, I mean, I think when evaluating on what kind of like ad integrations we want to do in our games, the first thing we actually look at is independent companies that focus on in-game advertising. For example, Farmaway, like that obviously was heavily discussed within Wooga, in terms of like, you know, yeah, in terms of like using boosters and not giving out currency. Yeah, so that's a great example, and that's something where we think, okay, how can that fit to our games? In terms of KPIs, we're looking at probably the most important KPI at the moment we look at is the exposure rate, so the share of the eligible DAU that engage with video ads per day. That's really interesting because in the end, if you can increase that share, you don't really spam your existing user base more, but you just get a larger share of a user base to really engage with that and create impressions. So that doesn't lead to lower click-through rates or anything like that, or lower install rates for the ad networks and for the advertisers there. So that's something we're trying to work on, and the main thing to do there basically is making the rewards and the integration more meaningful. Yeah.
So no word on AppDAO.
No, I was just going to get to that we didn't actually answer that part, so maybe I can start. We've been doing initially like 9-10 cents ARPDAO globally during our honeymoon phase when we launched on iOS in the early days, and now we're down to like 5-6 cents global ARPDAO, what we're doing right now, and that's both included, IAPs and ads included. But in the US, North America, US iOS, we're between 13-15 cents ARPDAO, which is okay for a casual game, but I'm pretty sure you have huge numbers.
I don't want to scare you people. So the social casino is a niche. So that has a distribution is super hard. So you don't get featuring support from Apple or Google Play. So distribution is expensive, and because of distribution is a problem that boosts up the eCPMs, because if you allow to show competitive games from competitive social casino publishers, you can see really high eCPMs, and the ARPDAOs on the best days during Christmas only with ads were plus 40 cents what we saw this Christmas. So Christmas is also a very specific time of the year, so we are not making every day 40 cents ARPDAO globally, unfortunately. But the social casino, you have to keep in mind that the installs are also super hard to make and super expensive. So
yeah, a problem that we have usually is, since we have quite casual games, we have very specific audience. For example, one hidden object game, Prospero, you have an audience that is very female. About 90% of the user base are women. The average age is above 50 years, so it's quite old as well, and it's very hard to actually find ad networks or advertisers that want to advertise for this user base. So again, there's like a huge difference between the different games. I think in general you could say we're around 1.5 to 2 cents per DAU maybe. But again, like that's then also for like in the millions of DAU we have in total. That has then also a nice impact.
So coming back to sort of like the early days of mobile gaming, there was interstitial, very intrusive banners, stuff that essentially didn't add any value to the actual gameplay. Now that videos, rewarded videos in particular, sort of like going big, and the demand is there as well, and the supply. I wonder, like, how do you guys use, or how did you try, and how did you end up using videos, rewarded videos, to actually enhance the gameplay, maybe increase certain KPIs such as retention, etc.
Well, I've kind of seen in previous lives in previous companies that video was already kind of more than up and coming. It had become the most valuable unit and the most valuable kind of source of ad revenue in many sense. And we can't really kind of differentiate too much in our game between people who watch a lot of ads and people who don't, because everybody watches ads in our game. So we don't have like a fresh cohort of users to kind of differentiate between retention for ad viewers and non-ad viewers. About 80% of our players watch ads every day. Not everybody does, but 80% do. And people always ask, aren't you worried about people leaving your game because you show so many ads for an average per every player every day, that people see other app install ads or game install ads? And I'm not worried about that, because the app stores of this world are full of free experiences that are of great quality, and people will choose with their fingers anyway and download something that is available there, or something through social networks, etc., and not only through ad networks in games. So the thing that we say is that we rather get paid for people leaving our app than not, because they're going to try some other new things anyway.
yeah, exactly. So I don't think we can hide the world, protect our users from competitive games. So, and I believe that the best product, best experience wins. So if we do a good job, they will come back, and that's how we think. How we started with the rewarded video, it was quite easy. In casino games, you have this return to player RTP. So typically players at some point would need more credits or chips, and If you don't pay by IAP, usually there's a waiting mechanic, so wait 4 hours, or in certain games less. We do faster. We are a bit faster giving free chips to players, and or you could watch a video, so get it instantly. And it was an extremely good match with the free-to-play casino. And but we've innovated quite a lot, more creative concepts how to use rewarded video.
Yeah, I mean, for interstitials, just to talk about that very briefly, we ran a couple of tests, actually, A/B tests, where we looked at what happens if we show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 interstitials per user per day, and with a 10-minute pacing, so not 5 interstitials after another, and we didn't really see any impact on retention. So that was quite interesting for us. In the end, we still decided to go for 2 interstitials per user per day with a pacing of 30 minutes, just because less is more in that case, nicer install rates, higher CPMs. So that worked well for us, and users apparently, looking at retention numbers, don't consider it like a terrible experience, really. In terms of rewarded video, what we try to do there is we try to make it fit to the sessions they play throughout the day. Right? So that the cappings we have there and the way we integrate it kind of fits to the session length or the numbers of sessions per day per user. So that users are, when they log in, then they find some value in watching a video, 1 or 2 videos, and then there's a capping, and then like if they come back later, like I don't know, during lunch break or so, then they can watch another video, and then in the evening they can watch another video or 2, right? And with that pacing, we try to really balance it out, make it fit basically to the overall gameplay and the game mechanics.
Let me rephrase the question a bit. So essentially, what I mean, like with rewarded video, you actually have an ad unit. You can sort of like actively, I don't want to say force, but lead the users in a certain direction. So kind of like the best example here would always be that, as you mentioned, Philipp, the pacing. So for example, in Farm Away, just to give you the people that don't know the game, essentially you're farming, and obviously in order to farm better, you need rain, you need sun, right? And you have a mechanic there where essentially if you watch a video, you have 2 hours to X, right?
4 hours.
4 hours
4
to
hours
X,
too.
sorry. So on one hand, you actually kind of like, the gameplay is neat, and so like it's part of the actual gameplay. On the other hand, you also force the user to come back every 4 hours. So my question would be here when it comes to the pacing / the capping. Is that something you would have your users do all the time? So essentially, even though they have 2 hours left, you can still watch a video, you can do it all over again? Or do you actually have some sort of like capping there that the user has to be within the game 5 to 6 times a day in order to keep that X2 running?
Well, in our game, like you said, we have a couple of kind of key units. The 4-hour rain that boosts everything, doubled all the earnings on your farm, and the 20-second sun that is not available all the time, and that's where we kind of naturally cap on our end, where we see different intervals of enabling the sun, and we're still testing different things. Do we get unlimited or 5 a day, etc., and how often? What are the kind of right frequencies for that? We don't have an answer to that yet, but we tended to go for kind of more natural caps that, we have a daily double that's only available once a day. We have the sun, the rain that's kind of naturally available every 4 hours. You don't have to do it. You said that we're forcing the user to come back. You're an addict.
I'm addicted. I do that.
So you come every 4 hours during the night as well. No, everybody does. People sleep during the night, some of us. Etc. So you don't have to come back every 4 hours. We did actually toy around with the idea that what if you watch another ad, or you actually pay an IAP, can you enable it for a selectable time, like 8 hours, so that you can sleep or go to Tokyo and not worry about your crops not getting enough water while you're actually on the plane. But we haven't done that yet. But there's interesting things that I think that you should do more kind of naturally within the game setting and the game world and the game pacing with the capping, rather than artificially just capping in terms of you have 5 times video a day to get diamonds or whatever, or the RTP to get more coins. I think if you can figure out more ways that feel thematically more natural, or the pacing from your kind of daily life, how you sleep and how often can you go and log into the game, if you can kind of try to fit to that, but make it also a bit uncomfortable in a way that you have to kind of play the system, because it gives another challenge for people who try to min-max the game and optimize as well. If it's too easy that you only will log in once a day and everything is, you know, super easy and everybody's on the same level playing field, it doesn't really give challenge from the game's point of view. So I do think you need to play around with the sessioning with rewards.
Yeah, I like also the concept of setting certain threshold cap and then supporting that type of behavior that people would be, you know, meeting that threshold. We've been toying with the idea. We haven't yet done that, and we don't currently have any caps. But of course, the ad networks, they sometimes run out of the inventory. So if you watch like 5 videos in a row, it may give that, okay, there's no more in inventory, and then the player would need to wait a bit. But we don't have any specific caps defined on a product level.
Yeah, if you look at across our portfolio, I think the magic number is 5. So daily capping is usually 5 per game. We had it higher in some games, but that didn't lead to more revenue. So in the end, we decided, okay, let's put it to 5. And then we kind of like try to balance it out, as I mentioned before. What we also do is we kind of like have situative rewards. So for example, if you run out of a life, then you can watch an ad and then you can keep on playing. That also makes sense. There we have different capping, but still we always like to have some kind of pacing, usually around 10 minutes, just because we want to avoid that binge watching, because it never leads to better click-through rates, better install rates for the advertisers, and we kind of like again, as I said, like less is more. We try to rather push up the CPM than the impressions.
So we've talked a lot about the frequency capping or pacing. One thing that is also interesting for developers in general is like, so when you're using rewarded videos, what is the actual reward? It could be anything, right? So what do you think is sort of like the most performing thing to actually give to the users? Is it gems or diamonds, or is it boosts? Is it consumables in general? What's your sort of like experience when it comes to the actual reward the user gets?
What we kind of opted for is that we don't give out premium currency or any currency of any kind from watching the ad. So like I said, we don't even do rewarded video as a unit or as type at all. We only give boosts, and we did that deliberately so that we wouldn't actually kind of take away the need or the opportunity of boosting the game on the other side of the fence on IAPs. So you can kind of offset those. You can offset your purchases and your buying by watching the videos. And technically you can buy the stuff that you get free from the videos from the store, but nobody does. They're just there to kind of instantiate the value for those from a psychological point of view, that this is how much value you get every time when you watch that video, to enable the rain, enable the sun, etc., and things like that. I think that in games where you go through a lot of currency, like casino games, I get that there it makes total sense to kind of go with the RTP equation and try to kind of see, because you're giving away free chips anyway all the time. So why not, you know, tie that to your reward video model? But I think in general, you would be better off thinking about what else can you actually give rather than your core currency from the videos themselves. Look for different kind of boost layers and game design layers that enhance the progression or any kind of advancement or sessioning in the game that give you something else than the currency that you could just as well be buying as IAPs from the store, and try to see the perfect balance for those.
It's good to listen Jami. Jami knows about this stuff, so...
But actually, just briefly, so especially social casino, right? So within slot machine, for example, you could obviously throw out coins, but also spins, right? So...
yeah, you could give free spins, you could give XP boosters, so... you know, there are other...
Winning boosters.
Yeah, there are different variables, so some companies may do some changes with the RTP. We don't do that. We actually try to follow as closely as possible the real gambling mathematic models because players seem to appreciate that. So they want more authentic experience. But we also have in our product XP boosters, and if you have a player who have a lot of currency. So of course, that player doesn't want to watch a video to get a bit tiny amount of extra currency. So for that, you want to give XP booster or something else. So there's no one size fits for all. It depends where the player is. Maybe you can watch a video to unlock a machine. Is that kind of permanent or temporary unlock? So we are experimenting this type of different mechanics where we could incorporate ad units.
Actually, so what about the player level? You just mentioned it, like if you're usually spinning whatever 100K, obviously watching a video for 5K is not going to break it. On the other hand, theoretically, you could also adjust the actual rewards according to the player's level. Have you looked into that?
We haven't done that. So giving there are some not all ad units we have. Some of them give more chips than others or currency, but we haven't done that type of tweaking where if you would be level 100, it would be relative to your basically progression in the game. I think we need to look into that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. That's like one of the key things Farmaway and Bitcoin Billionaire kind of like inspired us to look into is thinking more about how should rewards change with the progression of the user. Because that's something you can see, for example, in Jelly Splash, the engagement with video ads actually decreases over time the further and the further users progress through the game. So that's something we need to look into, right? It's something we need to change. So that's why I really like this daily double approach or just giving boosters, like percentage boosters, because they always keep their value. So that's a good approach, in my opinion, and one that we will also already integrating in some of our upcoming games. One thing we're trying to do at the moment mostly is basically giving out in-game boosters, right? So because we want users, when they play our games and they engage with advertising, we want to give them some good experience with the things they could also buy with in-app purchases. So giving out boosters works quite well for us, giving out lives as well works also good. Hard currency is always tricky for us because you would have to find a good balancing, then you have like a huge discussion with the game designer about it. So giving out boosts, giving out lives, that's usually the easiest way to go and also actually the way that most users appreciate the most in our games.
I think it's also kind of important to think whatever kind of monetization it is, whether it's IAP or ad monetization, think of the different types of monetization you can have, whether it's, you know, the white space monetization, if you have a level-based game, what happens between the levels, or where it's the bookends monetization, what happens when you come for the first session of the day, what happens before you leave every session of the day, those types of things. And then think of the in-game monetization, whether it's, you know, IAPs or ads, what happens inside the level or the match. Or the thing that you do in your core loop, and look at the different vectors there. What can you give us as boost layers, as rewards, as progression vectors, and is it social? Is it IAP? Is it ads? Those are all kind of interchangeable in a way. But I would kind of urge you to think of not making them always interchangeable, but think for the unique things that you can give on any one of these three, because that makes it more kind of discrete and more valuable in the player's eyes, because they need to kind of game three systems instead of one and just try to optimize for hard currency, for example. And I think it's always, it makes it more mid-core, but the meta game is more challenging for players and they kind of value that. Even if it's a simple game that, hey, I game the system on the ad side, I game the system on the in-game currency side, etc. And they feel better about it, progressing in the game, because there's more challenge for them.
I am your victim, you know that. I've actually played his game a lot, and also all other games that actually include rewarded video stuff. So I'm a user. But something else. We've been talking about monetization and videos, and I want to say we've probably focused more on sort of like the English-speaking countries, tier one, sort of the usual suspects. So looking into what's happening actually sort of like in the east of the world in regards to Southeast Asia, China, a lot of stuff is happening there. I suppose Southeast Asia is pretty interesting for the social casino market. China for probably more farm away as well as Wooga's games. So what I would like to know is do you actually perceive these countries in a different way? Is there sort of like different mechanics, different pacing, anything different to actually target these users opposed to the General Joe in America?
Well, right now we don't actually do any differences in the game configuration or pacing or progression, etc. Even though it's not a multiplayer game and people don't get angry because they're fighting with different rules or anything like that. It's a single-player game, but we still have the same, progression, velocity, etc. across all the different regions. Now, of course, we see different performance over IAPs versus ads. eCPMs are different in every country, etc., and all that. But as like maybe an anecdote that might be interesting, at least from our side, we didn't know that, can we get anything happening in China, because I haven't been able to get a lot of, ad revenue happening in China in my previous life in some other companies in the past. But China is our second biggest country since we launched, which was a happy surprise for us because we thought that the ad focus is going to make us very Western Europe and North America heavy, which are the most developed ad markets, etc. But it's been a happy surprise that China is actually sometimes above US for us on a daily basis, how we're looking at it on an iOS. We're still kind of 2 weeks into the Android launch, and we haven't published through a publisher in China yet, so the jury is still out. What does it look like on the Android side of things once we go there? But we don't deviate too much. We optimize, of course, per country on what to show to whom from you guys or somebody else in terms of the ad networks and all that, but not in terms of the game progression or anything like that.
Our flagship game, Huuuge Casino, is a real-time online multiplayer game. So on mobile, so that limits some let's say customization possibilities. Where we are looking into is that on a geo basis we could customize the UX layer, so the actual skin of the game and that type of elements. But when the backend is the same and it's a essentially MMO, so we cannot do anything too exotic. Otherwise, it would get impossible to operate as we operate our business.
Yeah, I think China and also Japan, same goes for Korea, are very specific markets, and you need to have like a very specific strategy if you want to tap into that. So what we are doing, at the moment we're treating everything the same across all geos. But for Japan, what we're doing, we basically opened up an office in 2014 that focuses solely on the Japanese market, developing games solely for the Japanese market. And obviously there we use different game mechanics. We talk with other ad networks than we would when talking about how can we monetize in the US. So there we have a specific strategy, but that also obviously just comes with the game being built specifically for that market. Other than that, we're doing the same, right? So if we look at okay, what networks, what advertisers have good fill rates in Russia, which ones in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 countries, and try to change basically the SDKs and adapters we have integrated in our games according to that. But other than that, no special treatment.
Perfect. One question that's usually sort of asked from the audience, actually. So, Philipp, you mentioned you're actually looking up to Farmaway for monetization. But in general, like as companies, I suppose there are a couple of companies in this space that have some sort of like role model when it comes to monetization and how they approach it. For example, you. But for example, who actually inspired you to do certain things the way you're doing right now? And obviously, the question goes to all of you.
Well, from our point of view, we looked up to a lot of the stuff that we did before at Rovio, for example, where we saw and were part of making those ad integrations and saw how well they're done. And we decided quite early on, almost a year ago in May, that we're going to go after the idle genre or kind of clickers, etc. We wanted to innovate on that, so we played through a bunch of games, like more than 10 mobile clickers out there, but we wanted to innovate and turn into swipers. Well, Adventure Capitalists, Tap Titans, Clicker Heroes, Bitcoin Billionaire, Green Your Planet, what else? A Cookie Clicker, of course. Those are the top 5 that come to my mind. But we wanted to make something that looks and plays more like a farming game, but at what we call it internally and to the investors, idle elegance with kind of AAA mobile quality. So it's a simple spreadsheet game at heart underneath the hood. Well, simple and simple. Getting the equations right is actually hard if you don't know math. But it's quite simple in many ways. So we have this term called minimum awesome product as well. and we try to build minimum awesome products. We don't believe in minimum viable product. We build minimum awesome products. So we build stuff in less than 5 months. Super concise. What you see is what you get. You can't scroll, you can't zoom, etc. But everything there is awesome. They poop, they fart, they fly when you touch on something, etc. So make every pixel count.
Yeah, we didn't find too much great role models from our category, from casino. So typically the free-to-play casino publishers, they don't do much advertising, or they do a lot of advertising on the user acquisition front, but typically you don't see much ads on social casino games. Now during last year it started to change, and I think we are really on forefront. So our role models, some of the games Jami mentioned, Adventure Capitalist, there are some other good ones. The runner games, I think they usually have a pretty good ad integrations, and so we review a lot of different genres and try to find cool new ideas what other publishers have done. But I don't have any other specific games. I think the Adventure Capitalist with their ad cap, that's brilliant. But there are other good ones.
Yeah, I already mentioned, like, we're obviously looking at independent games that are just built for advertising, monetization. In general, it's hard for us because most of these integrations are too hardcore for us. Like, you would never convince the product team at Wooga to do these type of integrations so deeply and heavily, because we still build games for in-app purchases first, right, reflected by our 85% share of in-app purchases on total revenue. But there are a couple ones that I personally really like. So I think Best Fiends with the spinning wheel, that's a very nice integration. You have Compass Point West, they're doing a great job just on teasing the user, right? So you draw these cards and then you see what you didn't get. I think that's great, that works really well. Seems to be working really well for them. Then I've obviously already mentioned Farm Away. So those are 3 games that I personally looked at more deeply in the past couple of weeks and months.
So the whole thing here was quick and dirty, so I've actually only one more question left before the audience can ask questions in case they have some. So not only in regards to advertising, but more in the mobile gaming space, like what do you consider to be the next big thing, let's say, happening over the next 18 months? Philipp, feel free because you're laughing.
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's always like predicting the future always worked really well. So
it's not about predicting, though. I mean, there are certain things you actually see earlier than, for example, us as networks, right? So there's stuff you might be looking into, or you have looked into for the last year, we don't know about. So it's not about predicting the future, more or less sharing, I want to say, the internal roadmap here.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I think maybe 2 things. I mean, the first thing is I think you will see more tighter integrations between in-app purchase and in-game advertising, right? So Wooga is doing it, and there's many other companies doing that as well, especially with video ads, just because it's been accepted by a larger audience of advertisers. I still don't see those big brand dollars coming in, like I don't know where they are. So maybe that's something that will happen this year, finally, after 3 years of promising it will happen. AppLovin is doing a great job there, obviously. But
we got to clarify that. We don't overpromise usually.
Yeah, I think that's a big trend. And then another thing is that IPs, like just IPs moving more into the gaming space, mobile gaming space. There's great examples with Futurama and Simpsons, some others. So I think that will continue to happen, and even more so than at the moment.
I'll approach question a bit differently. So from a data point of view, so I think first on the user acquisition side, it's already clearly based on these post-install events that you optimize based on those. So I think the industry is becoming more smarter, and the free-to-play product platforms are becoming more smarter if you want to be top in the game. So everything from smart dynamic segmentation to everything what you can do with the data to basically improve the player experience and also make your business better. So I think that's a big trend that's going to last for a while. So companies are getting more smarter.
I think that maybe the biggest trend in mobile, it's not anything new, is that it's just going to get more difficult. There's a couple of trends that affect that, which is that CPIs are going up, etc., and there's still 20 slots in the top 20 list. That's not going up for whatever reason. There's always 20 in that top 20 list. And screen sizes are going up. Yes, there's more pixels, but there's a limit to that. This is already too big on a panel sitting here, this big phone, etc. And at the same time, I think that there will always be niche hits, there will always be indie hits, etc. And the platforms, Apple and Google, for example, are doing a great job of having editorial view and point of view on raising up, smaller companies and smaller games, etc. But things like data or the post-data processing and understanding ads, understanding IAP, understanding user acquisition, understanding retargeting, etc., it will just get harder to do for smaller groups of people, etc. So in one sense, with big IPs, etc., and the kind of more difficulties in the market, I think that publishers could take on a bigger role. That's an opportunity actually right there for the taking for good publishers to have great IPs, marry that with good developers, and provide the kind of publisher related things what they can offer on the data processing, UA, retargeting, etc., and monetization help and all that. So hopefully that's a trend that we'll see better games with IPs, etc., with better monetization, better KPIs in general, so that better games for players in general. But I think it's just getting harder for the indies going forward. That's always the cycle of the platforms, how it goes. And in terms of what is else going to happen, I think that there's going to be a lot of stuff finally starting to seep through from Asia, like events and more kind of different kinds of feature frameworks that are in wide use in Japan, Korea, and China, but haven't really been used in Western games as services that are not really services. It's, the metaphor that I use sometimes is that a true games as a service would be something that wouldn't work like this. Imagine a TV channel, for example. I log into the local TV network here on a Monday morning, 8 a.m., and a Friday prime time, 8 p.m. Is it the same freaking show? No. It's a different show. That the TV channel is a service that adapts to the weekday and the time of day. But a lot of games offer the same content for the same players, for the same kind of irrespective of the time of day, etc., and all that. So I think there's going to be a lot of smarts based on data, based on segmentation, progression, geos, and player levels, etc., and events, and understanding on how to actually service and care for your community and your players in a better way. And I think that's going to be one of the key winners, where you can actually, as an indie, actually do a good job if you're able to create a community and cater to offering content that is actually generated by the community. Not in terms of users creating content or drawing or anything like that, but users are the content. They're the opponents and the collaborators and all that. So that's the kind of social that's going to win in my book, that is actually originating from the players.
Given you mentioned platforms a lot, and so what's your take on Apple TV? What's going to happen there within the next year? I mean, for example, with FarmAway, I can totally see people swiping with the remote to essentially harvest that stuff. Obviously, Casino also, you can spin the wheel, etc. with the remote control. And I'm still trying to figure out how to do Jelly Splash there, but maybe the next game. So what's your take on Apple TV?
I hope they succeed. I hope it gets really, really big by next Christmas when they slash the prices. The next generation now out this in the fall this year, etc., and becomes huge, pun intended, later this year. No, I'm still hopeful. It hasn't been a runaway success or anything like that. There are great games, great content. It's a great platform. I like using it, etc. It's the go-to device for my kids for playing instead of the PlayStation or the Xbox right now. But for whatever reason, it's not huge yet in terms of install base. But if somebody can pull it off, I think it's Apple. So I'm still rooting for them with that one.
Yeah, it's excellent to see new hardware coming to the markets, whether that's Apple TV or VR, and yet I think it will take some time before the new gadgets will exceed in shipments mobile devices. So at least for us, we are very much looking into those and hoping that they would become meaningful new revenue channels for us. But I think mobile is still, at least for us, where the real action happens, at least for this year.
Yeah, same for us. Mobile definitely is the focus, smartphone and tablets. Yeah, with Apple TV, we're not really focusing on that much at the moment. I heard a story last week in Finland. Someone was telling me like published a game on Apple TV, and then like one person bought it, and then it was number 2 top crossing. So I don't know. Like it's I think it's tough to really make money there. It's still a niche market, right? Not everybody has an Apple TV. There's also Chromecast out there. They're also, I think, looking for game publishers, or they were looking for game publishers. So I think it's tough to make it there. What Wooga is trying at the moment, more on an experimental stage, so we open up a small studio and that focuses on how can we make wearables, so basically the Apple Watch specifically, what can we do there, like what kind of like apps can we create for that platform. But it's also tough, right? Maybe even tougher than the Apple TV. So focus is definitely on mobile.
Yeah, when you add new platforms, and if you are doing free-to-play game kind of as a service model, so that means that you need to do frequent updates. So that just in a longer run it adds a lot to your update cycles. And obviously, if you don't have an online game, so you could ship it once and forget it if it doesn't perform. But with the real-time online multiplayer game, that's not an option for us. And if we are not pretty certain that the numbers make sense, we rather wait a bit.
Yeah, I mean, like what I think is interesting is looking at ego shooters, for example. There was a time where you had like a couple of ego shooter games on smartphones, right? And where you had like the controls basically directly transferred, right? So he has like 2 sticks on the bottom left, on the bottom right to move and shoot. And that was always kind of like weird because it doesn't really fit with the touchscreen so well. So for us, developing something for wearables or for TV, we also have to take in consideration that this also requires a different way of actually playing these games, right? So the underlying mechanics are completely different. If you look at the Apple TV, then we're actually moving back to consoles. Like moving back, but we're moving to consoles than if you would develop for the TV. So that's tough to do for a company like Wooga, where we basically been saying since 3 years, mobile first, mobile first, mobile first, right? Because you have to change the whole way game design is being done. So that wouldn't be an easy change.
I have a couple of wishes that should happen for the mobile industry, which I think would be healthy for everybody's monetization. And I think it would be great to have any of these new, well-selling, handset manufacturers be able to become a global player, whether it's HTC, Huawei, or whoever that actually will be. I think having more than 2 platforms, even though it adds complexity for updates, etc., but it's good for competition from developers and publishers' point of view. And the biggest kind of swing factor, I think, for small or large publishers is that once the China market matures, that there's more consolidation and there's less open market stores and less hassle. China is like the J2ME market, 10 years ago or 12 years ago when we were doing things in Europe. It was, 400 stores, 35 languages, and 1,200 SKUs per game for Europe. Crazy. It's not that bad in China, of course, or anything. Monetization works better, but I think that could be a big swing factor once there's more and more players who consolidate more in China, so that it's easier to get your game published and really widely monetizing in China going forward.
Well, marvelous. We are almost running out of time, so if anyone in this room has a question and wants to address these 3 gentlemen or me, feel free to shoot it right at us. If not, thank you guys. I had fun. I hope you could learn something as well. If you have any questions afterwards, feel free to come up and speak to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.